On today's episode of Survival Dispatch News, we're discussing the topic of getting home after an emergency.
Hey guys, today's video is brought to you by Ruko drones. This is the Gem 2, the second generation of this awesome drone. You know, drones are great products for surveillance, for security, for monitoring wildlife, for content creation, a lot of neat uses for this drone. It has great video quality, and as always, we'll have a link below so you can check out the Ruko Gem 2 drone.
And we're back. Jason's joined us from the Blue Ridge Mountains. Denny has joined us from his top secret 2A hideout. And again, today's discussion is around getting home after an emergency. If you've been following some of our recent content, Jason's done some videos and some community posts on the subject of getting home. So I'll turn it over to you, Jason, and let's go.
All right. I got some crazy roosters in the background right now, so sorry for the audio. But I might have to take 5 and chase them off here in a minute. But it seems like as soon as I start the camera, they flock to it like a magnet. It's ridiculous. But anyway, get home scenarios. I kind of think I break it up into 3 categories. One of them's the normal mundane, broke down on the side of the road, perhaps in a desolate area. And you've got to figure out how to either solve the problem with your vehicle, perhaps, and get out of there in that fashion, or you've got to walk out to go get help in some other way, or signal, or whatever. Second scenario is, let's say you're a little bit further from home. Let's say you're at work and you've got a 20-minute commute. You know, a typical commute to work. Whatever happens, the EMP happens, power's out, your car's got 4 flat tires, whatever, and you've got to get your way from wherever you are to home, a fairly good distance. And then the third one, which is the most sexy, and the people like to talk about the most, is, let's say you're cross country. You're way across country. You're a long ways away on a vacation, perhaps. You don't even have your vehicle. You flew there, and now suddenly crap hits the fan and you've got to find a way home in that situation. So that's the much more extreme situation, much less likely, but much more the one that people like to talk about the most. And I'd say we just kind of dive into them one at a time, and let's talk about the first one. Most likely you're broke down somewhere on a backcountry road. You were going, 4-wheeling, you were going camping, whatever it is, and then now suddenly you've got a problem, and how do we solve it?
Okay, so I would probably add to that, even if you're not broken down, if you're off the grid completely and you get twisted around, as we were discussing off camera, when I drove my truck from, bought it in Kentucky, drove it to our cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains before driving it back here to Florida. When I got off the grid nighttime, driving some roads not familiar with around the Tennessee River, man, I was completely lost. If I didn't stumble across a person walking down a 1-lane dirt road to get me pointed around, Lord only knows where I would have ended up.
Yeah, we're so dependent on technology, right, Chris? So you have no phone signal. Do you have maps in your vehicle? Maybe not. I'm an old school kind of guy. I like to have maps. I even carry a pocket calendar because I'm losing my memory these days. But yeah, old school stuff comes in handy. And a situation like that, having the old Rand McNally maps that don't depend on technology really can come in handy in that instance, right?
Yeah, I mean, technology is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I use it all the time. We use GPS.
Same here. Yep.
Almost daily. But it does fail. And everyone has had an experience where GPS has gone wrong, and it suddenly you've got to go back to the way we used to do it. And it's and for some people that's overwhelming just in and of itself. It's just, how do I get from A to B without this GPS telling me turn left here? And that could be a deal breaker for a lot of people. So just like you were saying, having an actual map, a backup map, is a huge thing. A compass and just a road atlas, not even like crazy detailed stuff, just the regular like you were saying, I forget what they're called, but I've got one in my truck too. The
Rand McNally.
Yep.
Yeah. I've got the same one in my truck because with that and a compass, I can get my way. I can go all the way across the country and back. Like I can find my way. Yeah,
that's right. Another thing I want to bring up is, guys, is this is in the back of my mind. It takes if your vehicle's running, you got to have fuel, and if you have access to fuel, you got to have money. And if the grid is down, if your vehicle's running, there's no electricity, how are you going to get fuel to keep traveling? Yeah. I mean, there's so many things to think about.
Yeah. A ton of variables. I've read a few articles. I can't speak to their veracity, but basically people 30 years and younger ish, the vast majority don't know how to read a map. You know, they've strictly learned how to use, you know, their GPSs and whatnot. So not every state, but most states, every county road intersects a state road. Every state road intersects an interstate. So if you can get to a county road, there's some light at the end of the tunnel that you can potentially get yourself out of a mess that way. The other thing I'd mention is, you know, these InReach minis. Tyler's got one, I've got one. So far, I've only had one experience where I couldn't connect to the satellite network, and I was really deep in a valley. But for $11.95 a month, I think is what we pay for the safety plan. Well worth it. You know, you can, I think the number somewhere around 10,000 people have been saved now after pressing the SOS button, like legitimately saved, not lost and, you know, kind of pointed back, but people who had legit emergencies.
Yeah, I've got that same unit, that InReach Mini, just to keep it activated and carry it with me pretty much all the time. I don't anymore. The only time I activate it is when I'm going to, I know I'm going to go to a very remote area, and there's a very good possibility that something could go wrong and I'll be on my own. So that's the only time I use that. But it is super handy. I have used that InReach Mini when there's been zero cell phone service, and I could send a text message, to my wife at home, letting her know that I was snowed in and there was no possible way I'm getting out. And just to let her know not to freak out. I mean, she knows that I'm going to be fine. I mean, I'm not going to die because of snow, but right. Would be worried if I didn't show up that evening. So that's just another thing to think about, is just a normal mundane, like we're talking, this first scenario is the normal mundane. You're broke down, you're stuck in a ditch somewhere, whatever it is, you've crashed your motorcycle over the hillside and you're hurt, and then you need someone to come get you out of this trouble. That's the get home scenario there. Maybe you just need to call for help.
Yeah, I'd add that, as you probably know, then I didn't realize you had one of these minis as well, is that as long as you have satellite connectivity, you can pull down maps in close proximity to wherever you're at, and through the smartphone app. So, you know, your smartphone's Bluetooth to the mini. You request a map for that area, it downloads it over the satellite network, and you're good to go. I mean, we were on a boat a couple of weeks ago and came off of Lake George, headed all the way west over to 19 south of Palatka. And we had no service or anything at all, but I used the mini to kind of capture some screenshots to see what our path was through there. And it was kind of cool that we had it, we were quite a ways off the grid. I think we traveled somewhere around 15 miles on the water before we picked up phone signal again.
I might have to take a quick break here. Oh, come here. Sorry. Well, I have to pause. I'm watching my niece. Come here. This is my niece, Autumn. Come here.
Hi, Autumn.
Say hi.
Hi, Autumn.
She's got some boots on.
Oh, yeah. You showing Uncle Jason how it's done?
That's right. Can you go play for me? Give me a few minutes. Oh, in just a few minutes, but you got to play right now, okay? I'll come play with you in just a few minutes, okay? All right. See you later. Have fun.
Live TV.
Yeah.
Don't stairs with those giant boots on.
I'll let you pick up this.
Give her a second to get a little further down. Okay, you can see her trying to walk. Hold on, I'll show you. You can see her trying to put these boots on. Ridiculous.
Oh, jeez.
Oh my goodness.
Oh God.
Whoa. Uh-oh. Little country girls are tough.
That's right. Well, she's not even a country girl. She's a city girl. She's up visiting for the week.
Right on.
Yeah. She's not used to going barefoot. Otherwise, she would be. My kids would definitely be barefoot.
That's fine.
All right, I'm gonna go run her down the stairs real quick. Time out.
Hey, Chris. So I just want to take this opportunity while Jason's taking care of business, just to discuss quickly for our viewers who would maybe like to hear your opinion on a bug out bag versus a get home kit bag. You know what I'm saying? What's your input on that?
Well, I think the biggest determining factor is, where do you work? So if you work 10 miles from home, 20 miles from home, that the bag should be built keeping that in mind. What's your level of physical fitness? So how many miles could you realistically cover in a day? And then the next thing is as a general rule of thumb, your get home bag, your bug out bag, whatever, should not weigh more than 20% of what you weigh. But even then, that would be 40 pounds for you or me. That's a pretty heavy backpack to be carrying.
Yeah.
Then as Jason and I developed this, Survival Insider trilogy, which is going to be a big focal point. I want to give credit where credit's due from everybody who's contributed stuff. Well, one of our, followers made a comment on one of Jason's posts or videos and said, haven't seen anybody suggest a folding bicycle. And man, you can get them for $120 and fold it up and throw it in the back of your truck, lock it to the bed, throw it in your trunk of your car, whatever the case may be. And the premise was awesome because he said you can cover a lot more ground on a bicycle a lot faster than you can hoofing her by foot. I thought it was like a fantastic thing. So good that I copied it and put it into our note on the Insider trilogy, because I'm going to bring that up. I think that's a great idea. So to answer your question, I think that everybody's, get home bag needs to depend on how far do they work from home? What's the environment? Is it urban or is it, rural? What's their level of physical fitness? So on and so forth.
We are back after a brief interruption. And we were talking about scenario number one, where we're broke down somewhere. We've gotten into a jam, and we've got to either find someone to get us some help so we can get home, or we've got to walk our way just to back to civilization somewhere where we can get some help. Another thing to talk about in that situation is just make sure. Let's say you are stuck over the hill somewhere. Your truck's stuck. It's a snowstorm, whatever it is. Traffic has stopped completely. No one's moving because the roads are frozen. Maybe you just need to have the right equipment with you so you can spend the night in your vehicle. A sleeping bag inside your car. Like that's super basic stuff. People have died in their vehicles freezing to death
recently
because a basic something like a sleeping bag or a blanket or just enough clothes. How many people do you know leave their house in the wintertime dressed like it's summer? You know what I mean? And they just have they know they're in a heated car and they're going to a heat station. How many times have you seen that? All the time.
Yep.
Right?
All the time.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway, just basic stuff, having some basic tools with you so you can change your tire. How many people do you know don't even know how to change a tire? That's another crucial thing. Just life skills like that can get you out of, what would be normally just a very mild inconvenience, right? It could turn into a survival situation, and it never should be if you just have some basic skills, basic tools, knowledge, things like that. Yeah. Right. But anyway, so we'll transition into the second phase, right? Let's say you're further from home. Let's pick a scenario. We're at work, 20-minute commute, right? Let's call it that. 20-minute drive to work, which let's say is 10 to 30 miles away, somewhere in that ballpark, depending on traffic kind of deal. EMP happens. Cars don't work. Everybody's at your work freaked out, and everyone's like, I don't know what to do. The first thing you should think about doing is getting home as fast as possible, right? Just leave where you are, gather the supplies that you need out of your vehicle if it's not working for whatever reason, and just start trucking home. That's what the best advice I can get you, because the calmest things will be is right there at the very beginning. You have a little bit of a window of time before people start really freaking out.
Or it all starts falling apart.
Yeah, people are going to freak out in the initial beginning as well, but people aren't going to immediately start becoming cannibals. That's not going to be a thing immediately. So you've got a little bit of time, and let's say you're, rooster in the background, 20 miles from home. You can walk that in a day. A reasonably fit individual can just start walking, and you can do that in about 6, 7, 8 hours, and it's not even at a really, really fast pace. So just something to consider there. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, Denny and I were talking off camera with regards to what people should have in their get home kit, and I think the scenario you painted is the most likely scenario, where somebody's at work, there's some sort of event, and they've got to get home. So it's going to be predicated on things like you mentioned. How far away from home are you? What's your level of physical fitness? Another consideration is, what do you do about your kids if they're in school? So do you have to make a detour to go and potentially rescue them as well? Where you live, what the geography or topography, I should say, looks like, all those sort of things. So you're right. You have this like initial window before people really figure out just how bad things are, to try and cover the most ground. Because once people figure out something like an EMP strike or nuclear blast that was far enough away that we didn't immediately feel it or hear it, but were affected by the EMP blast, all those things are going to, well, we know we've got comments from people who follow the channel who've said, I'm not prepping, I'm not saving anything, I'm just going to take it away by gunpoint from other people.
Yeah, that's that kind of stuff like there. Those type of comments. That's it angers me, and it makes me sad for humanity. Because immediately people's minds go to raping and pillaging as soon as laws go away, right? Mm-hmm. Just because the police aren't there to enforce the laws, they think that it's going to be, one of the comments that was so ridiculous is like, basically, they said something along the lines, if I see a guy hiking, down the road with a big backpack on, that just makes he's an easy target, and I'm going to take whatever he's got, murder is still murder, whether it's a law or not a law. You know what I mean? It's wrong is wrong, no matter what. Yep. And those people, either they're internet tough guys and just talking a lot, or there's legitimately crazy people out there that will do these types of things, but I don't think that they'll come out immediately. I think we've got a little bit of time, a little bit of window.
Yeah, that initial window is your opportunity to cover the most possible ground. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that you're, 40 miles for your commute to get home. You're not going to cover that in one day on foot. So right. You can cover that initial distance before the wheels really come off and total chaos erupts. But after that point in time, you have to start considering things. Is it, would it make sense to be moving at night and not during the day, under the cover of night? There's multiple variables. So when Denny and I were discussing this, there's no one size fits all. I think this is an example of Pareto's principle, where if you, you digest some content from somebody who's a subject matter expert in, survival, let's say, they can get you 80% of the way there, but that other balance, that 20%, you got to kind of figure out based on your own circumstances.
Yeah. Every situation is going to be completely different. And we can, just like preparedness in general, you can plan and prepare and, analyze every possible event imaginable, but you're never going to know exactly what these situations are going to look like. You're never going to know how difficult this walk home is going to be until you're doing it.
Right.
How people are going to respond under these situations until it's happened. You know what I mean? So all these things, I mean, in getting back to that, talking about gear and like what you need, a lot of people they overthink it. Right. Let's say you're 20 miles from home, or even 40 miles from home. What's the number one most important piece of gear that you can have with you in that situation? And that's a good pair of shoes, a couple pairs of socks, and a good pair of shoes.
Good point.
That's pretty much it. Can you get water, and can you walk
without
your feet falling off?
Yeah, I'll say hydration.
Yeah,
big time.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. No one wants to talk about that because it's boring, right? But everybody wants to know what kind of gun they need to have in their pack. All well said. As much as we're gun guys. I get it. But that's not That's not even close to the number one priority. You have a comfortable pair of shoes, broke-in boots, whatever it is, a couple pairs of socks, a way to stay hydrated. You can walk miles without eating 100%. You can walk 20 miles without anything. Even without water, I bet I could walk 20 miles. If I started out hydrated, I could probably walk 20 miles without a drink of water. It would be horrible. I might not feel very good the next day, but it's probably possible.
It's probably doable. It's not going to be fun, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'd add one more. I mean, you got some really interesting comments on your recent, videos and polls on the community part of our YouTube channel. One of them, somebody made a really interesting comment. They said, I haven't heard anybody else mention folding bicycles, and they're inexpensive, and you can throw it in your trunk. You lock it in the back of your truck bed, whatever the case may be, and you cover a lot of ground a lot faster. I thought that comment was so good that as we work on our Insider survival trilogy, which we've kind of hinted around, but we'll have it ready to go in the next couple months. That comment's going in the trilogy. I feel that was a high value contribution on the part of one of our viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. The bike thing is super keen. I've done a couple of get home scenarios in the past. When I lived in California, I was 28 miles from work. All right, so I had to drive 28 miles every day to get to work. And in one scenario, I had a bicycle in the back of my truck. I drove to work, and then I went to work, and then at the end of the day, I got my bicycle out of the back of my truck and I rode my bike home. All right. No problem. So easy. It was a nice ride. No big deal. 28 miles on a bicycle is not that big a deal. And then a few months later, I did the same thing, but I drove to work and then I ran home. That was miserable. That was horrible. That's 28 miles on foot, and that was pretty bad in one push.
Yeah, 1.8 miles more than a marathon.
Yeah, I broke a bone in the top of my foot, a stress fracture. I was chafed. I didn't have a lot of blisters on my feet and things like that, but I was definitely not feeling good. I was in a bad place. Yeah.
I saw another interesting comment on one of your recent videos where a person said that once a year, him and his friends, starting Friday afternoon, would do a simulation of trying to get home over the course of the weekend with nothing but whatever they had in their vehicle, and that they didn't utilize any electronics communication devices. They just considered that we're off the grid, we've had an EMP, and we've got to survive this weekend and get home over the course of the weekend. And the person who made that comment said they learned a lot of lessons on stuff that they thought they needed that they didn't end up needing. And like you said, Jason, you can prepare all you want, but it's always the thing that happens that you don't have at your disposal, right?
Or the weather's different. Like you've practiced this. Maybe even you're one of the gung ho guys out there that's actually gone out and used your gear, which is so great, right? But let's say you practiced in the summertime, and now it's wintertime. That's a whole different thing. That's not even close to the same scenario. So you can only prepare so much. Be willing to endure the suck. That's some good advice.
I mean, there's an old adage that says practice the way you play,
Yeah.
So it's all about repetition, whether it's athletics or something like this. So the more repetitions you do for an activity, the better you get at it. And so if you just buy a bunch of gear and stuff it in your vehicle, that's better than doing nothing.
Sure.
But you haven't tested it. You probably haven't learned the skills to use those tools. I mean, our friend, Dr. Michael Fabian, had a subscription to one of these monthly, survival box companies. And he said the content was like the tools themselves were really good quality, and he really loved them and stuff, but they sat in the corner in his barn and collected dust, and he didn't learn any tangible skills. So he canceled his membership. So acquiring the tools is only the first step. Learning how to use them is imperative.
Yeah, it's a big deal, but it requires time. It requires an investment of time and energy, right? And a sacrifice of other things that you maybe want to do more. And unfortunately, not everybody's willing to do that. Fortunately for me, it's what I like doing, and it's like my hobby. So like that's kind of great, but that's not the situation for everybody out there. So I can understand and sympathize with a lot of people, but there's still no excuse for the laziness and the unwillingness to learn the skills. And, people are their own worst enemy in situations like that, where you're just unwilling to do what's needed.
Yeah. And I would also like to add, including your family members in that training and skill set. And I know you do that, Jason, but I don't know how many people think that I'm the man of the family. I'm going to take care of everybody. But I would highly encourage everyone to get their wives and kids involved in these skill sets, because something might happen to you. They might have to pick up the slack.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I'd add another thing. I've noticed that there's been a pretty significant increase in companies offering some form of online training for survival and prepping stuff, because as Jason said, time is the most valuable commodity in the world. It's the only thing you can't buy, you can't replace. So while it's not ideal to take some online training as opposed to tangibly doing it hands-on, it's still better than nothing. Like, no knowledge is bad knowledge. And so we have some friends that are in the virtual reality world. The company name's Mode Meta, and the head guy there is a phenomenal guy. He was the lead developer for Call of Duty. He served in the military. He was an MMA fighter. He is a really big believer in this sort of stuff. They've signed up EJ Snyder, from the, Survivor TV show, and they're going to be offering online training that's like either virtual reality or augmented reality in concert with EJ Snyder. So it's still not as good as going to, what was that event that you went to, Jason, in Northeast Alabama, where Randall's Adventures, that SE Knives, basically. Yeah. I mean, that's like the best thing that you could do. But if people have responsibilities, obligations, and they just can't peel themselves away for something like that, this, virtual reality stuff is interesting. You gain some knowledge. You don't gain the hands-on practical skills per se, but it's better than nothing. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to transition into the third phase, the most fun phase that everyone likes to talk about?
Right. Yep. The Hollywood phase.
Just to recap, third adventure that we'll talk about is, let's say you're really far from home, 1,000 miles or more, whatever, across country. And let's say you drove there and the EMP happens, and now your vehicle's useless. All vehicles are useless. You're driving down the interstate. This is what I imagine in my mind. If I was going to write a post-apocalyptic book, this is what would happen. You're driving down the interstate, right? And then suddenly all the cars' headlights go out at the same time, and all cars just come to a stop, right? So there's the scenario, and you're 1,000 miles from home. What do you do then? That's a big one. That one's tough. And if you've got your family with you, Chris, like you were talking about, and what do you do with that? Are you going to walk 1,000 miles with your toddler? Is that going to happen? Is that a thing? I don't know. That's going to be really tough. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it can't be done, but that's a tough scenario. And I think the number one thing that we should probably consider in a scenario like that is having a network of friends. And that network of friends could be spread out across the country very easily. I've got friends in a lot of states, heading all the way out to California. I've got friends in states that I could rely upon. And if I showed up, they'd probably give me a hand. So, and I know the naysayers out there are going to say, your friend in this SHTF scenario situation won't be your friend anymore, and they'll turn you away or whatever. So I get it, maybe, but maybe not. I still believe. I have to have faith and believe that there are good people out there that will do the right thing, even when things have gotten really bad.
And that makes me think about communication. How do you get in touch with those friends? Which we touched on.
Yeah. So, on the communication side, I keep fully charged ham radios in a Faraday bag. So
smart.
If everything went dead, everything electronic, that would be my go-to. First thing is to pull it out and see if I could get any intelligence on what's happening. Excuse me. But I think Jason's comment, as far as having a network is concerned, if you're hundreds or thousands of miles from home and we've had a nuclear strike, an EMP, whatever this event is, the prospect of you getting home is pretty slim. And so having a network of like-minded individuals is imperative, number one. Number two, I think when you get into those types of scenarios, the Hollywood scenarios, as I mentioned earlier, it boils down to what do you bring to the table? So if you have Jason's level of skills, I think it would be highly unlikely that somebody would say, no, you can't be part of our group. But
no, he's the kind of guy we want around.
exactly.
For sure.
The people who bring nothing to the table, from a survival perspective, those are the people who are going to be an extra mouth to feed. They're going to get left out in the cold because scarcity of resources, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I like to think about in this situation is historical references. So there have been people that have walked across this country for the most part. They used boats, but their names were Lewis and Clark, right?
Yeah.
They traveled on foot and by boat and by horse. The entire basically, well, not only about half St. Louis, I guess. So they traveled all the way across the Rockies, all the way to the West Coast and back. And it took them a couple of years. But the thing to note probably in this situation is that they were heavily reliant upon the native peoples in the areas. They didn't just pack up all the things that they needed and walked and got there.
They couldn't have. It would have been impossible.
It would have been impossible. There's no way they would have died without the help of Native Americans across the country. So they had a community, a network of people that they were reliant upon, because you can't just hunt and fish your way. You know, people think about this lone wolf thing like, oh yeah, I've got my backpack and I could walk the 1,000 miles back home. Could you? You know what I mean? How much food can you carry? And then what happens when that food runs out? How well? I know for a fact. I have gone a long time without eating before. I went almost a month without eating really any food at all. And I'll tell you what, walking across the yard was an exhausting effort. And if you think I'm joking, try it. Like, it is everything you can do to just get up and stand up without getting dizzy and falling back down again. So it's the lone wolf thing where you think you can just make it on your own, hunt and fish your way across the country. I think that there's a very few people, if any, in the world that can do that successfully.
Well, and even if they could, chances are extremely high that they're going to run into bands of people who do not have good intentions.
Yeah. And don't want you crossing their property. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have the benefit of strength in numbers. So you're by yourself. You're in a pretty vulnerable position. Even if you're trying to travel, off the beaten path at night, all those sorts of things, I don't think that that's a, really viable solution to say,
or
across the country.
Or you step in a pothole and roll your ankle with this giant big pack you've got on. Then what do you do? Yeah, who's going to help you? Like the water hole is another half-mile hike, and then you can't walk. You know what I mean? Like, just stuff like that. It's very unrealistic, and it's a fictional illusion that I think a lot of people have. Have friends, be a good person, be the person that you want other people to be. And you are much more likely to receive help when needed.
Yeah. And be able to generate that network of support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 100%. And hey, Jace, you've hit on this in the past, but I'd like you to, just for our viewers' sake, talk about the mental attitude that goes along with surviving these circumstances.
Yeah. That's like what I mentioned before. Having a good pair of boots and maybe a change of socks is the most important. A can-do attitude, like that is a big deal. I will take the novice that's never been outside before, but is just happy, smiling, even when the chips are down. Way before I'll take the expert that's just pissed off at the world. I much rather survive the post-apocalyptic zombie scenario with a happy individual than the expert pessimist.
Yeah. Amen. Yep.
I mean,
you can do it. If you believe I can do it, I can walk the 100 miles home. I can do it. If you believe that you can do it, you can. It's a fact. It is true. If you believe you can, you're also correct.
Yep.
Yeah, you are what you think. But I mean, what you hit on there, I've used in hiring practices for years. I mean, I have literally interviewed thousands of people and hired thousands of people over the years. And there have been people that I've interviewed that are preeminent experts in their field, but they brought a whole bunch of bad habits with them. And it just made a lot more sense to hire somebody who was green to teach them our way of doing things.
Sure.
So, that aspect's at play as well.
Yeah, being around, and it's exhausting being around someone that's like that. It wears you out. It brings everybody down. You know what I mean? It's a real thing. That group dynamic, that positive energy is contagious, and so is the negative energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
well, I think we've kind of covered all the bases for today. It would take us series.
We talk about this forever, but yeah,
we could go on. No, Chris, we could go on and on, really.
Yeah,
that's what I was fixing to say, is that, to cover every aspect of something like this, I mean, we could write a series of books, we could do a series of videos and still not touch on every potential scenario. But at the end of the day, right from the beginning, Survival Dispatch's, mission has been to, spread information, good information, so that people are empowered on some level. And, that's what we continue to do to this day. And that's, I think, what drew us to Survival Dispatch, and it draws others to Survival Dispatch, is the sharing of knowledge and self-sufficient, look after yourself, look after your family, all those good things. So I think we'll wrap up there for today's episode of Survival Dispatch News. We'll be back again next week with another episode. Jason, Denny, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
You bet, fellas.
Sorry about the roosters in the background.
Hey, wait. When the shit hits the fan, you got to have chickens.
I'm gonna
for sure.